Céline Lebrun-Shaath, welcome to Troublemakers.
Thank you, Phil. I'm happy to be here.
Today we're going to talk about a heavy subject, which is jail solidarity. And this is a subject that you have a lot of personal experience with, especially because of what your husband has gone through. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the story and then we'll get into some of the questions.
Sure. So my husband, whose name is Ramy Shaath, is a well-known political activist. Is Palestinian and Egyptian. And so we used to live in Egypt, where we were both, he was the general coordinator of the BDS movement there in Egypt. I was myself an organizer within the movement, and Egypt not being a very open space for activists, in July 2019, in the night of the 5th of July, policemen stormed our place and arrested him. I was myself also arrested and deported back to Paris, and so started a long fight to get him out.
Yeah. So, what was that fight like?
So it's been intense. I remember, first of all, the first hours, the first days following Ramy's arrest, the fight was also just to know where he was, because in Egypt, you have this habit of people being arrested and sometimes disappeared forcibly. So first trying to find his whereabouts.
You're trying to find his whereabouts as you're being deported.
Yeah, so I was deported in that night. So second day, so when I arrive in Paris, I'm calling his sister, the lawyers. Nobody knows where he is. People have gone to the police station, who is denying, that they have him. Though I saw, because when we were taken in two separate vans, one of the van took me. We both went to the police station of our neighborhood. There I was put in a civilian car that took me to the airport, and him, I don't know where he was, but I saw the van, stopped in front of the police station. In that police station, they pretended that they didn't have him, and that they didn't know where he was. And we were lucky enough that he reappeared after only 36 hours at the prosecutor office. You have many people who disappear for weeks and months, sometimes years, and their family are too scared even sometimes to speak up. And So then he reappeared in front of the prosecutor office, where we learned that he was accused of supporting a terrorist organization. The prosecutor refused to even tell him what terrorist organization he was supposed to be supported, and then he was sent to pretrial detention. And this is also here very typical in Egypt. First, to use terrorist-related charges to prosecute activists, and to use the pretrial detention as a way to simply arrest people without ever putting them to trial. He has even been charged. They're not even been charged, right? Because the pretrial detention is pending investigation, and to know whether or not that person is going to be charged. And
in Egypt, is there a constitutional allotment for how long that period can be?
So supposedly it's supposed to be up to 2 years, right? But actually a lot of people have gone past that period of time and are still in pretrial detention.
Including for non-political
including
reasons?
Mostly for political. They are mostly using this for political, but it also appears that sometimes, just someone in a village or something got, in trouble, more kind of personal trouble with some policemen. So, and they will use that also to sort personal.
Right.
So, yeah.
Before you continue, I want to have a picture of so you're back in France, and of course this is a very intense moment. You're very worried. did you call some people? Were there people who came to you to help?
Yeah. So obviously, like, first it was the family. Like, we got together to think about what we could do with also very close friends who are part of the like activist networks, lawyers. And one thing, like Ramy's father being a high diplomat in the Palestinian Authority, a former prime minister, minister of foreign affairs. So there was a request like that we try first like the private diplomacy way from my husband's father. So we had to try that. So for the first 6 weeks after my husband's arrest, we could not communicate, right, publicly about his arrest. And what was surprising is that even the authorities did not communicate about my husband's arrest, which they usually do as soon as they arrest a high like a well-known person. Immediately they go out in the media and start a smearing campaign against them, right?
Right.
And what was surprising was that they didn't do that with my husband.
And worrying, perhaps.
Not worrying because he reappeared, but that also maybe there is actually a chance that just arrested him to scare him, to send a message, and they will release him. So we did try the private diplomacy. Didn't work out. I was very skeptical. I was like,
sure,
if they decided to cross this line of arresting my husband, despite who he is, the weight of his name, and
easily?
They were ready to bear the consequences of having like private pressure from my father-in-law and other people. So, but I guess that's a choice that many families face, in Egypt, which is first to talk or not to talk, to go public or not public, to like do a campaign or not. It's a real, because you don't want to put the
both
person.
Choices are bad.
And you don't want, the most important thing in your mind at that time is like you don't want to harm the person that's in prison, right? So it's what's gonna help him or them to get out as fast as possible. So, and this is something, and then at every step, I took during the 2 years and a half that this fight went on, is like, just making sure you're like taking the right decision, and so seeking for like all the advice you can get, as different sometimes as they are, so that you can make then your most enlightened decision. And that's something I learned really when the stakes were so high and personal, that I was very careful but yet active, right? Not like too careful that I would be paralyzed. So
yeah. So tell us what happened next.
So what happened next? So during that time where I couldn't go public, I did start like reaching out, especially to NGOs who had been working on the issue of political prisoners in Egypt, knowing that Egypt was very famous at this time for political prisoners, right? There were NGOs were talking about over 60,000 political prisoners. So talked with some of them in France, so Amnesty International, FIDH, ACAT, and trying to figure out what kind of support they could provide, what were the steps that I should follow, and having them to also be willing to endorse and support if we were to go out publicly, which we did eventually. So end of August, after 6 weeks, we first issued a family statement to announce. So we actually we're the one who announced the arrest of my husband, and started the campaign. And I remember one of that person that I spoke with told me, you have to get yourself ready for 2 years. And I was like, that's impossible. There is no way he's gonna stay all that time. And
you would almost rather believe that like you remain naive and think that at any point it could be tomorrow, than to know, to hear like a professional say, oh, it's 2 years, prepare yourself.
But it was also grounding, and I was kind of like rejecting this, but also like I knew it was a possibility,
right?
And so through the whole 2 years and a half that it lasted, I was waking up every day and going like thinking, okay, how can I get Ramy out today? But also building a campaign, and also what grew to be like even a movement for the release of political prisoners that would be able to sustain. And so there is something in Egypt, like, first, when he told me that, he said he's going to go out before the 150 days. Because what happens in Egypt is that when someone is arrested, they go in pretrial detention for 2 weeks that is renewable for a period of 10 times, which leads up to like 150 days by the prosecutor. So it's the prosecutor. So for all that time, the detainee is not even seeing a judge, right? And after the 150 days, they go see a judge, and the judge is the person who then renew the detention. And so there's a lot of hope often that when comes the end of that 150 days, the judge will release the person. So that I had first this timeline in mind. And so then it was about building momentum around each renewal of detention. So every 2 weeks we had this like moment, and we came up with different calls to action, like either to write to the prosecutor, to like call the embassy, so different type of action. But I knew also from like analyzing the situation that the only way to get him out was to get the highest involvement possible from France, the French government, i.e. the president himself, or the US government, and preferably the president himself. So that's what I worked on. And so working on building a team for the campaign in each of this country. Luckily, Ramy has a lot of family in the US that started writing to their representatives and getting involved. So we're able to form a team also with NGOs in the US and same in France. And so we started reaching out to lawmakers and lawmakers from the presidential party, right? And here again, also I learned a lot, being activist for Palestine and BDS activist. There was a lot of skepticism at the beginning that anyone would be willing to like speak out and support our case and Ramy's case. But I managed to find ambassadors or lawmakers, including from Macron, the presidential party. And that also taught me a lesson, right? That sometimes when we're activists, we're like convinced that, anyone who doesn't think like us, it's not even worth sometimes reaching out. So sometimes we end up talking to like left elected representatives, people who are more aligned on and think alike. But this time I knew that the freedom of my husband was in the hands of those people who could pressure. So I went and knocked at all the doors I could, regardless of, those people's perspective on Palestine, Israel, BDS, without ever hiding, who my husband was. But it was about simply getting a man out of prison that shouldn't be there.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what actually made it happen? How did he get out?
I believe he got out because the campaign was like just kept gaining momentum over the 2.5 years that it lasted. And this was a real like something we really worked on because the Egyptians, they believe that the campaign is gonna grow a little bit, and then eventually people will get tired and will stop talking about him, especially when there are so many prisoners. And so we had to really make time our friend and to show that every action was mobilizing more people and more support than the action before. So like to tell them, no, this is only going to get worse for you, right? And we had to make Ramy's detention really a crisis, especially in the French-Egyptian relationship, which we managed to do.
How?
By mobilizing more and more lawmakers, we reached the point in which the president of the friendship, like the France-Egyptian friendship at the French Assembly, National Assembly, froze the relationship with their Egyptian counterpart until Ramy was gonna be released. We used also, like, so in December 2020, Ramy was coming for a visit. Not Ramy, sorry. The President Sisi came for a visit, a state visit in France. And so we used that to really, like, a huge media campaign to raise the case of the issue of political prisoners, and especially at the head of whom Ramy. And the pressure was so high, including through media and Twitter campaign, we managed to get the president to, like, say in a press conference that he had talked about the issue of political prisoners and had asked for the release of Ramy. So we knew this was like a tipping point because, you know, when a president says something in a press conference, it's making it like, then it would look very bad if
he doesn't follow through.
If it doesn't follow through, right? So then we knew it was a matter of time, but we had to keep pushing. And so we kept pushing, mobilized even more French elected officials from all levels, right? So whether they were mayors of cities, Ramy got the honorary citizenship of some cities. So yeah, asking for the release of Ramy and reaching out to the 2 years.
At the 2-year mark.
The 2-year mark, yeah. Right? And we did, like, then a huge protest in front of the Egyptian embassy in 5 countries at the same time. And we handed over a petition of 100,000 signatures that was led by Amnesty in those 5 locations at the same time. So we had France, we had Brussels, so Paris, Brussels, Washington, and in Spain, in Madrid, and also in Ramallah in Palestine.
So when we talk about jail solidarity, there's a few things here, and I think this is a interesting conversation because we're often so focused on Ramy, or the equivalent of Ramy, the person who's in jail. But it's great to hear from you as Ramy's partner and comrade how you're also affected by this. Was there a point where you started to kind of like shift your focus on getting him out vis-a-vis, like, making sure that there's no torture, making sure that he's okay, making sure that he has, like food and contact maybe with the outside? Or how did you kind of balance these different kinds of needs? One, to get him out, to get justice of some kind, at least for Ramy. And then also, like, the basic needs, the humanity. Do you have what you need to survive in the meantime?
Well, we knew, like, so luckily the family there in Cairo was able to visit him at the beginning every week. And then when COVID happened, it was only once every month. Though actually for 6 months we were completely prevented from seeing him. But we were able to know he was okay. And we realized quickly also that public exposure, that the higher his profile will be, the most protection you will have also inside. And not only him, but also actually other political prisoners, people detained with him, that Ramy was able to, fight inside the prison to get more time out, etc. So that's something we realized quickly and we worked on. And actually the campaign also, something I want to say is that though we worked hard to, like, make Ramy, come out of the crowd of political prisoners when there are 60,000 people, but we always fought for the release of, like, all political prisoners. I mean, it was always free Ramy Shaath and political prisoners in Egypt. And we led a lot of action, like advocacy action, So a big tactic that we used was to get lawmakers to sign letters, right? Joint letters, whether it was to their own government, whether it was to the Egyptian president or to the Egyptian embassy. And those letters were never just about Ramy. It was always about the situation of political prisoners in Egypt, and we would name many other prominent figures. And actually, the campaign and this pressure and this movement that we built, not just around Ramy, but this issue, we managed to get most of them out, right? So it was a big victory, not just for Ramy. When Ramy came out, they actually had to release many others because it had grown so big, way beyond, just one or two names, that they had to do a real show of releasing several dozens or even 100 people. Obviously, unfortunately, the repressive regime is still in place, and so you have people who go out and other people who go in. Yeah, it was still a victory.
Still a victory, yeah. Jails are terrible ideas. I mean, it'd be great if we could have a planet without them. But in the meantime, we're really grateful that Ramy is back home, that you guys are together. And do you feel grateful at all for the solidarity of the campaign? Like, have you been able to sustain that? Have there been relationships formed that are now useful for, other campaigns to free political prisoners in Egypt or otherwise?
Yes, I'm definitely grateful. I don't know how I would have survived even, just those 2 years and a half without the teams that, I had. We were meeting weekly and just, so even when, I couldn't, because I stayed for a long time without being able to even talk to Ramy or have any direct contact with him. So being able to meet with these people, and sometimes, we had high hopes that Ramy would be released and it wouldn't happen. So just, Wednesday at 10 a.m. we have the team meeting, and just being able to have their support and be there and just, let's re-strategize. What got us that close? What did we miss? How can we make sure we have this next time? Just kept me going.
Yeah.
So the relationships are, still there, and those people are still doing a lot of great work on political prisoners. When Ramy came out, actually the campaign, immediately we went from Free Ramy Shaath to free them all, and we went on a tour for a year of advocacy meeting, mobilizing people on this issue to try to get as many more prisoners out. So we went to, whether it's the European Parliament, meeting with different ministries in different countries. We did a tour in the US. Then eventually we also had to take some time to rest and heal, but and also then the genocide in Gaza started. So there is always so we're always on the front line,
Okay, yeah, always on the front line. You didn't set out to, you set out to win for the BDS campaign, to win for Palestine, right? The focus wasn't initially on freeing political prisoners. And I think this is one of the most kind of egregiously violent things that powerful people in the world have done, is create this prison thing that they can just put you there, and it derails everything that you were working on. It's like a very effective strategy for them, to silence us and to limit our power. How do you think about these balance of duties, reacting to the repression and trying to build solidarity around that, but not losing sight of the potential victories that you can win in the causes that you're fighting for otherwise?
Yeah. So I guess first, like Ramy and I had built a movement, right, the BDSAG movement, that was able to, overcome the arrest of his general coordination, deportation of another coordinator, and so I guess was something very helpful. And they went on and continued their work, and I carried, like I took the lead of the campaign for Ramy, and also with this like intention to make it something worth, that Ramy's detention, we will make something good come out of it. We will make sure that we come out stronger than we were before. So whether it's in terms of political capital, so like all those relationships that we've built that I like during the campaign, that they will benefit us when Ramy comes out. And that's eventually what happened. When Ramy came out, he had a very high platform that he was able to use to talk about those issues, right? And people were willing to listen to him. And so that's what we're trying to do now, is to use this platform. And so, for example, now Ramy has been forced into exile. So he's now in France, and he has been able to launch a huge movement, a new movement, for a solidarity movement for Palestine, using part of like the capital and the platform that's been built around his arrest. And with another, actually, comrade, Palestinian former prisoner in Israeli prisons, Salah Hamouri, who was also forced to renounce, to leave Palestine. So it's interesting how really oppressors are exchanging tactics, but now they have somehow been reunited or like brought together in France and have been able to form alliance and work together to launch this movement. So that's what I think that's the way we should respond, right, to arrest. It's how we can turn this difficult moment, challenges, into an opportunity for growth. That's always how I've looked at it.
So in the kind of ecosystem of jail solidarity, what are some of the gaps that you notice? Because a lot of, organizations that have done this for long, they swing into action with their strength, right? And, maybe lawmakers or friends and family, comrades, they have a role to play. But for some time, we are going to live with this reality that there are detentions, there are intentionally prolonged court cases, there's torture, there are jails, and people are going to be sentenced. I don't know how long until we abolish the system, but it's with us for some time. So it would be helpful to know, what kind of gaps are there? What kind of what things could we be more mindful about and intentional about when it comes to doing jail solidarity?
That's a good question. Honestly, right now, nothing comes to mind, for the 2.5 years of Ramy's detention. I was actually quite, and I have to say, positively surprised by how the different NGOs, for instance, were just willing to support me, right? So and maybe also because I was an organizer, so I had some, experience in terms of strategy and things we can do. And I was very mindful of involving everyone in the process of strategizing. But so when I would say, okay, I think we need to do that. We need to so they were very eager and willing to follow and put their different resources at the disposal of the campaign. So that's something that I was really because NGOs, they have their own agenda. And maybe it's just that, the campaign fitted their agenda at that
maybe
time.
Sometimes, yeah.
But still.
But also, you were a directly affected person. You're a family member of this. I mean, you were deported, but also you're a family member of somebody in jail. And I think there's a moral authority in that. It helps, of course, that strategy and stuff like that. That's not always the case, right? Our family members don't usually.
That's for sure.
Yeah, have that kind of skill set. But I can imagine, if you're detained and your mom or your partner shows up, to an organization, it would be kind of hard to like just inhumanely turn them away.
No, sure. I'm not saying turning away, but like it's more also like, they could have been like, okay, no, we don't think we should do that. Yes. And no, they were very, again, as I said, willing to like, and definitely I think part of it comes from this moral authority, but still again, and maybe also because I had, found the right people who were like just full-heartedly in that, right? It was not just a job. The one thing, because you were asking of a gap, for me, the gap was really mainly after Ramy came out in terms of the psychological support and just the support to the person who's coming out. And maybe because it was a situation that they were not used to it. Like sometimes you support someone who's being detained and then they're released, but in their country, right? You're not faced with like that person coming in your country so this idea of like, what support system can we put in place? Was not as strong as it should or could have been for someone who's been 2.5 years in prison. And I've seen it with other also activists who've been released, and many of them, if they're not forced into exile at the moment of their release, many of them like find a way to leave because their safety is at risk if they stay. And so we have many friends, activists, who also came to France that Ramy managed to like, bring to France. So the ecosystem, the support for prisoners was not really clear and operative, and especially the psychological, support part.
Yeah. There are still tens of thousands of political prisoners in Egypt and God knows how many around the world. We will share in our show notes for this episode any links that you have, related to how people can get involved in this campaign or similar ones. But for listeners who are taking a first step to do any kind of jail solidarity, including possibly for people that they don't know, where would you advise them to begin?
Supporting the family, I think, and empowering the family is always the best place to start because, sometimes, as you mentioned, they might not have the skill set, the experience, the courage sometimes. And so just being with people, seeing this solidarity might, give them, enable them to fight. And to know like what to do or not to do. Like it should always go back to the family to decide. That's my, and sometimes we're like, when there are our comrades and get arrested, we're very eager to act. And sometimes we don't always consult the family. Yeah. And so I think that's like, in terms of principle, that's a principle I would like always encourage activists who want to do jail solidarity to follow.
Yeah. I have I had this chance to visit a friend called Stella Nyanzi in prison a few times, and there was one day that I returned to the prison to deliver some, just to say hi and also to deliver some, small bags of different basic essentials. And every visitor there that day was being permitted to see like the people that they came to see. It was normal visitation hours at Luzira Women's Prison in Kampala. And some hours, went by, and people that came much after me were being allowed to see who they came to visit. And I was just kind of trying to be patient, and wait and see. Although I started to get worried, like maybe something more sinister is happening here. But then I started hearing Stella like doing a protest, because I think some people who had received their visitors told her like, hey, we saw that friend of yours, he's been there a long time. And so she she came to the kind of like the gate of the prison, and she started, shouting and protesting in the rain. And that woke something, and I didn't know what to do, right? I didn't want to make her situation worse, but I also didn't want to not have solidarity, right? So unfortunately, I forgot my little bags of things that I brought for her. I could have passed them maybe over the gate or something, but I just went to the gate to talk to her, and immediately the officer in charge started shouting at me. I ignored her. She sent people to, rough me up and force me out of the place. Like, you're in a prison and you're being forced out. It's also kind of an ironic thing. But, we got to talk for a few minutes, and it was apparent to me that she was glad that when she started protesting, I, came to her and we chatted for a little. And but I still live with this. I don't really regret what I like, my action or my reaction to her action, but it lives a little bit as a conflict in my heart and mind, because I think the next day the officer in charge called her for disciplinary action, and sentenced her to several weeks in solitary, where she was subsequently tortured and subjected to really bad conditions. So some of these things are really in the gray area, ethically, strategically. There's a lot of unknowns, and there's a lot of guesswork. But I mean, I hope I'm not discouraging anyone. Like, I really, although there's all these unknowns, like, the important thing is that you try. The important thing is that you try to show up, that you try to offer what you can, bring your sincerity.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, knowing Stella, I'm sure, I don't know, I imagine, that she was glad that you came, and that she knew also, the risk that she was taking, but I think, and from hearing Ramy, and so maybe Ramy will get to do a podcast one day, and could be the mirroring, but yes, sometimes when we were because of the work we were doing outside, this press conference with the two presidents, yes, second day, they went and broken the cell of Ramy and searched for, phone, and broke stuff, but Ramy was very happy, right? It was because
he won in that moment. Actually,
yes, because, and so you can do whatever you want, right? But the power he had gotten from the small victory, and also actually 2 months later, I was able to visit him. One of the first step after this press conference was that I was finally granted a visit, so I was able to travel back to Egypt, to Cairo, to see him, and I was able to hand him over hundreds of cards, of that people I sent with words of solidarity, etc. And so that he shared, and not just for him, but with all his cellmates, and so they gain strength from our solidarity. And Ramy always says that, those who oppress us, they like to oppress us in the dark. And we need to put the spotlight on them.
Sure. Yeah.
And yes, they might not like it, and they might, get angry, but eventually that's the only way to make them stop. That silence and the dark is never, and just keeping things the way they are is never the way to make them stop. So yeah, so I always keep that in mind, and then I think it's just a matter of nuancing. Something also during the campaign, I knew what were my red lines, right? I wanted to get Ramy out. I knew that eventually the person who could take this decision was the President Sisi, and so for example, I never, mentioned him directly, never attacked him directly, because I didn't want this to become, personal,
right?
Which we have seen in other situations, unfortunately. So it's also learning from this, and that's maybe another advice I would give to people who want to do jail solidarity, is that, you have to distinguish between the person and the cause that you're pursuing. And so, for example, even me, myself being a BDS activist, advocating for Ramy's release I had to distinguish between this and advocating for the BDS movement, right? And so that people could come around Ramy as a person, as a human, regardless of their opinion on BDS. And so for 2.5 years, I almost put down a bit my BDS activist hat and focused on that. And that's also another advice that a dear friend, former political prisoner, also told me, because sometimes I torn also with ethical dilemma, okay, I'm gonna go talk to this person, a lawmaker who is potentially pro-Israel and anti-BDS, and it's you have to differentiate, and it's not keep and your principles and values and Ramy's values and principle, but now it's not about convincing that person to stand for Palestine or for BDS. It's about having this person stand for freedom of speech, freedom of movement, and against arbitrary detention. So I think, and sometimes as activists it's hard, right? So
one of the things that I remember from Rules for Radicals, which was written by Saul Alinsky, who was a very prolific community organizer, he described that the organizer has to, at one moment, completely demonize the target. This is a bad, evil person. And then at the next moment, sit at the table with that person. And, wearing those hats simultaneously, 1 second after the other, it's not easy to make that switch. But I also think there's a lesson there. Maybe it's sort of like a call, to listeners. Don't leave people like Céline holding the duty of BDS Egypt, BDS Palestine, while she's also mobilizing jail solidarity for her kin, we need you out there, we need more people to be holding these things together. We shouldn't have to take off these hats, put on another one, focus on this, focus on that. I mean, this is late capitalism. Survival is hard enough, just mere survival. So when people are out there doing more than one thing to try to change the world, see that as an opportunity, see that as oh, hey, here I can help with something, right? And if you don't know what that thing is, ask someone, So hopefully, this is inspiring, the fact that there are people that have voluntarily put so many things on their plate, have taken so many risks and sacrifices because of their beliefs, their values, the world that they want to see, the world they want to live in. So please, this is a chance to join us. So if there is anyone listening that can do one thing right now, as this podcast concludes, is what can they do, Céline?
Yeah. So actually, not one, but two things come to mind, especially as we're talking about, thinking about those who remain in prison and the necessity for people to join in the struggles that those people were carrying, in addition to being in solidarity with them in their detention. The Moroccan authorities have arrested a few weeks back an activist, a BDS, the BDS activist from BDS Morocco. His name is Ismail El Azawi. And so there is a campaign that's being carried out by his family and by the BDS movement today to stand in solidarity with him. So I invite people to go on the website of BDS movement to see how they can act. There is different ways to take action. One that includes sending a postcard to the Moroccan embassy in your country, wherever you are. A second person that comes to mind is Ala Abdel Fattah, who is a prominent Egyptian human rights defender activist who's been in prison for more years than I can count, and who has actually now passed his end of so he was condemned, and like Ramy, he was condemned to a certain amount of years in prison if I'm correct. And actually, he has now finished this term. He has finished his term, and still he is maintained in prison. His mother has been on hunger strike for 5 months. And so I invite people to go on the Facebook page or like I believe on other social media platforms for Free Ala, and to again see how they can support. They regularly post ways for people to engage. So now it's about pressuring the Egyptian authorities to release him as they should.
Please do this with us, friends.
Hi! We hope you enjoyed the conversation on this episode of Troublemakers and feel inspired to stir up some good trouble in your own community. Do feel free to check out our other episodes and subscribe to Troublemakers Podcast in your preferred podcast app. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook as troublemakers.podcast for all the latest updates, behind-the-scenes content, and sneak peeks of what's coming next. We also love to hear from our listeners. You can email us via troublemakersthepodcast@gmail.com or simply drop a DM through our social media. And hey, if you enjoyed this episode, take a moment and share it with a friend or leave us a review. It really helps us grow our community of troublemakers. Keep shaking things up.